Well, Hollywood has always been a political place, but wow, the rhetoric has amped up recently. Actor Robert De Niro was honoring Al Pacino at the American Icon Awards. What's that? Who can keep up with all the self-awarding going on? But it's an award show. When he suddenly derailed his speech to go crazy about the president. Watch.
The individual who currently purports to lead America is not worthy of any tribute. Unless you think of his impeachment in a president as a sort of tribute. Now that's how you can make America great again. You didn't think you were completely going to get away with it without a Trump moment, did you?
There's something about Donald Trump that makes Robert De Niro go full taxi driver, and always has.
It's just beyond surreal what this guy has done.
You called him a mutt.
He's a mutt.
You still believe he's a mutt?
Every word I said then, I mean today.
This idiot is the president. The guy is a fool. Come on.
How dare he say the things he does? Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Right.
Angry old guy. Author and columnist Mark Steyn joins us tonight to marvel at how much rich people hate Trump. It's almost like the same people are always going on about privilege. The more privileged you are, the madder you are about Trump. Why is that?
Yeah, that's the way to look at it. Robert De Niro lives better than 99.99% of people in the entirety of human history have ever lived. And he cannot accept that a close election in a 50-50 country didn't go his way. This is deeply bizarre. You mentioned that I'd never heard of these American Icon Awards, and I think it's a faintly stupid title for award. In Australia, they have an award called National Treasure, which again doesn't seem like the kind of thing you get nominated for. I mean, these kind of names are in the gift of the people and the general mood. But if you do actually have something called an American Icon Award, then the guy has to be an icon for all Americans, including the 60-whatever million people who voted for Trump. It's not just the Hollywood partisan Icon Awards. And if I were Al Pacino or anybody else at risk of getting an awards speech prize presented to me by Robert De Niro, I'd start carrying the equivalent of an organ donor card saying, in the event that I get nominated for a prestigious award, I don't want Robert De Niro coming and giving the speech because he talks about Trump for 7 minutes and then says, oh, and by the way, here's a statue for Al Pacino. This is ridiculous. This is beyond derangement. He has actually become more insane than Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver.
Well, what's interesting, though, usually, the revolutionary spirit is aimed upward, give the finger to the man. In the last 2 years, you've watched this parade of, again, the most privileged people in our society shouting down at Trump's voters. Yeah. Damn you, working-class Americans. You must be quiet. How dare you speak? Has there ever been a revolution aimed in this direction, down?
Well, no, I think that's what it's interesting. It's a worldwide phenomenon in some ways. The elites rising up against the masses. But I think that's actually true. I think I saw something of it with Mrs. Thatcher in the United Kingdom, where essentially privileged elite artistic people just regarded her as vulgar and lower class in the same way that they do with Trump. But the fact is, they're killing themselves. There's a book out at the moment, White, by Bret Easton Ellis, as you know, the novelist of American Psycho. He voted for Hillary. He's gay. He's nobody's idea of a conservative or right wing, but he was dating this young millennial guy, and the young millennial guy went full Trump derangement syndrome and became impossible to live with. And that's the same situation. Would you want to wake up in bed with Robert De Niro every morning, boring on about Trump? They shouldn't have American Icon Awards. They should have Best Cranky Embittered Grandpa 40 years past his acting best award, because he'd be a shoo-in for that.
He'd definitely be in the running. Though I would argue there are some other contenders.
Yeah, it's a crowded field. And it's not even an age thing, as we saw with Bret Easton Ellis's insufferable millennial boyfriend. It spans the ages among the Hollywood elites.
The great Mark Steyn. Thank you, Mark. Great to see you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Well, every child in school right now is taught about a mystical thing called white privilege. But if white privilege is real, why is Elizabeth Warren and so many others trying to pretend they're not white? Maybe it's not privilege. We'll tell you after the break. If you've got a kid in school right now, it's almost certain they're learning that skin color is the key question about people. It's the most important thing. Some children's color makes them tainted. They have white privilege and must be punished for that. But here's a question. If white privilege is real, and everyone in our ruling class seems to assume it is, if it's real, then why are so many people pretending not to be white? It's not just Rachel Dolezal or Elizabeth Warren. In the Varsity Blues college cheating scandal, parents were told to invent fake non-white heritage for their kids in order to improve their chances of getting into elite schools. One person who may not be surprised to learn this is Joseph Ingham. He's the author of Almost Black, How I Got Into Medical School by Pretending I Am Black. He joins us tonight. Joseph, thanks very much for coming on. So it does make you wonder, and this is not in any way an attempt to pretend that American history isn't real, the ugly parts of it, of course, it is real. But this idea that white privilege is the dominant fact of American life is challenged, I would say, by this fact. Wouldn't you say?
Well, the Varsity Blues admission scandal kind of shows that white privilege is somewhat of an archaic notion. Because, in fact, Rick Singer advises clients to lie, as you said. It's actually quite common for white people and Asian Americans to lie about their race in order to get admission to school. They call it the Pocahontas factor. I did it. You mentioned Senator Elizabeth Warren. They do it because they know it can improve their chance of admission. Now, as an admissions consultant for sosadmissions.com, I recommend that my clients not disclose their race. If you are Asian American or white, do not disclose your race in your application for college or graduate school, as it can be shown statistically to reduce your chances of admission. So the best option is not disclosing your race, which kind of indicates the opposite of white privilege, if you think about it.
Well, it kind of does, considering that, and this is one of the points in your book, that elite college admissions, I mean, that's the doorway into the American ruling class. I mean, that's one of the pivotal decisions in a kid's life is where to go to college. What college can I get into, right? So if being white hurts you there, how does it help exactly?
It also hurts you in employment as well. But the truth is we're missing the point. You talk about going into an elite ruling class. The truth is that there are merit-based factors in admissions, like your grades or your letters of recommendation or your essays. And we need to move towards a merit-based system of admissions.
Amen.
And college admissions consultants like me, rather than encouraging people to lie about their race, why don't you help them to write a more effective resume or an application essay or do well in an interview? Because by teaching someone to do well in an interview or do well in a resume, you're teaching them skills that will help them not simply to succeed in their interview or their application, but you're teaching them skills that will enable them to succeed in life. So rather than promoting a society where race is a huge factor, we should promote a society in which we focus on the merit-based factors and help people to give skills that will help them succeed in life, because that is the purpose of an education.
Amen. Amen. I think you said it better than I could have. In the 30 seconds we have left, since you do this for a living, do you think we're moving closer to that or farther away from that?
Well, with the new adversity score, I'm just afraid that we're moving away from that, because, of course, the adversity score can be manipulated simply by declaring you have a different address. Focus on the factors that help you succeed, your grades.
Right.
Those are the things that will make a difference for the long-term better of our education system.
We sure hope so. Joseph, thank you so much for your perspective. Great talk to you tonight. Up next, smartphones and the internet allow young people to stay in constant contact with everyone they've ever met anywhere in the world. So why are today's children the loneliest generation ever? There's a reason. We'll tell you after the break. Thanks to cell phones and social media, it's easier than ever to talk to people all over the world whenever you want to, obviously, but it's not working exactly as you would expect. Today's teenagers are the loneliest generation in American history. In 2017, for example, teens met with friends 68 fewer times than they did in 1990. Children have fewer friends, but more anxiety. They have fewer dates, but more depression. Suicide rates are rising. So what is causing all this? We put that question to one of the smartest people we know, Johan Hari, author of the book Lost Connections, Why You're Depressed and How to Find Hope. Here's what he said. So this is one of those results that's the opposite of what was predicted, maybe opposite of what you would have expected. Why is this happening?
I wanted to think about this a lot. So for my book, Lost Connections, I went to the first ever internet rehab center in the world. It's just outside Spokane in Washington. I remember when I arrived feeling really annoyed. I stepped out of the car and feeling really annoyed I couldn't check my cell phone. It wasn't working. And I was like, oh, right, you're in the right place. So it was a really fascinating place. And I remember spending a lot of time there. They get a huge range of people in this internet rehab center, but they disproportionately get young men who've become obsessed with these multiplayer role-player games like World of Warcraft. I remember talking to the woman who runs this center, Dr. Hilary Cash, and her saying to me, you've got to ask yourself, what are these young men getting out of these games? They're getting the things they used to get from the culture, but they no longer get. They get a sense of a tribe. They get a sense of an identity. They get a sense they're good at something. They get a sense they're actually roaming around because American kids now barely leave the house. But what they're getting really is a kind of parody of those things. The more time I spent there talking to people who become completely obsessed with social media or video games, and the more I spoke to the social scientists who study this, I began to realize I think the connection between social media and social life is a bit like the connection between pornography and sex. I'm not totally against pornography, but if your entire sex life consisted of looking at pornography, you'd be going around irritated and frustrated the whole time, because that's not what we evolved for. We didn't evolve to look at screens for sex, and we didn't evolve to interact through screens. We evolved to interact face to face. And when you have a huge decline in that, that leads to a big increase in depression and anxiety. It's partly a symptom, right? Actually, loneliness had been supercharged already before the internet arrived. Part of what happens is the internet arrives and it looks a lot like the things we've lost, right? You've lost friends, well, here's some Facebook friends. You've lost status in the economy, here's some status updates. But it's not the thing we've lost. It's not filling the hole there.
So if young people, and young men specifically, have lost a sense of identity and tribe and meaning and purpose and the kind of useful risk that young men need, don't we have a whole generation that's ripe for a demagogue to show up and say, here's an identity, here's a purpose, here's some risk? I mean, this is a perilous situation for a society, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of the things that really shocked me for the book that I learned is there's scientific evidence for 9 different causes of depression and anxiety, and there's one that I think really relates to your question, Tucker. So everyone knows that junk food has taken over our diets and made us physically sick, but there's equally strong evidence that a kind of junk values have taken over our minds and made us mentally sick. For thousands of years, philosophers have said, if you think life is about money and status and showing off and thinking all the time about how you look to other people, you're going to feel like crap, right? That's not an exact quote from Confucius, but that is the gist of what he said. But weirdly, nobody had scientifically investigated this until an incredible man I got to know called Professor Tim Kasser. And he discovered 2 really important things. Firstly, the more you think life is about money and status and showing off, the things that social media trains you to do, the things advertising trains you to do, the more likely you are to become depressed and anxious. And secondly, as a society, we have become much more driven by these junk values over time. There's been a really big increase. But there's also really hopeful things there. Professor Kasser showed relatively small interventions can really help. So he did a program where you just get teenagers and their parents to meet in a group once every couple of weeks for 4 months to just talk about moments they have actually found meaningful in their lives, right? Not buying Nike sneakers, not how many likes they got on Instagram, but meaningful moments. And they keep checking in to show, okay, how can we build more of our lives about seeking those meaningful things and less about all this junk that culture is constantly pumping us full of? And just doing that led to a really significant